Okay, everybody, it's 5:30 on the nose, so I'm gonna go ahead and start us and then as others will file in. Um, Would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Rivera,
Yes.
Commissioner Ayala,
Present.
Commissioner Burleson,
Here.
Commissioner Gerber,
Here.
excuse me, Commissioner Meeks,
Yes, here.
Commissioner Rourke,
Here.
Commissioner Tomites.
Here. Okay, well, we just called to order and I'll go ahead and move us to our first agenda item. Do we have any citizen comment period? No, okay. So our item here is discuss and consider meeting schedule. While we have everyone here, everyone's here. If we can,
It's appropriate.
we can work on that schedule now before anybody has to take off. I know some of you have to take off a little bit early. And if you want to bring in your calendars real quick, I had a notice that this third week of the month is typically a Wednesday meeting because of your commitment on tomorrow with the other committee and my commitment with Parks Advisory tomorrow as well. But I know Thursdays work probably well or better for some. So if you want to do the 27th, Thursday, instead of a Wednesday next week, does that work for everybody?
The 27th.
Yeah. Anybody have conflicts for that one?
So,
5:30?
okay, what is the kind of doing, like alternating on the Thursdays?
Well, on that third week of the month, yeah, we'll have to alternate. Because Thursday's just for two of us have a,
The next Wednesday would be April 16th.
yes, I would say yes. And the only thing I would just caution us by is we might finish before that last Thursday or that third week of April,
Okay.
which is I'm hoping.
For right now, though, if it happens out, that I'm kind of, I'd rather go ahead and kind of wrap it out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any other conflicts for Thursday in between here and there, so. Well, yeah, that third, actually. There's 4 Thursdays. No, there's 3. 1, 2, 3. There's 5 Wednesdays in April. So yeah, I guess those meetings are gonna be on the third Thursday. So yeah, that Wednesday would be the 16th. So if we meet that week, that would be the one Wednesday.
April 16th.
Yes. I think we'll probably be close to wrapping up before then. So, as it stands right now, if everybody's good, we're meeting next Thursday. Okay. Yeah. And then the next item on our agenda was consider approval by motion of February 13th and 27th regular meeting minutes. There's a couple of typos that we discovered, just some sentence wording. Would anybody have a heartburn if we postpone the approval of those to our next meeting?
So we can make the adjustments.
Yeah,
Yeah, we just
instead of doing it.
meetings, we can make some corrections, then we'll bring up all the minutes, you'll be current through, we'll do them all together, that works.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right, thank you for that. And then so we're going to dive into our section by section of our standard operating procedure, basically starting with section 501. And so if everybody wants to get that in front of them. It's on page 14 of 36. Wait,
Someone need a copy, everybody's got their copy.
So that would still hold regardless of what we do with the mayoral. The city council elections are still 3-year terms, but I'm making like every year. That's correct?
501.
Yeah.
Regular city election shall be held annually the first Tuesday and after the first Monday in November as provided by the state. Yeah, I think, yeah,
It would still be. Yeah.
it's gonna be, there's gonna be an annual election for city council, and obviously everything else. But, and the terms we've already gone through, and had our first 2 blushes at those, and then we'll come back with the final recommendation where we, vote yay or nay on all that stuff.
If council was change, well, no, you're still gonna have that. Should even- I was just thinking if they changed the city count, because we decided not to change the terms of the council members to 3. That's not gonna change anything. I'm just wondering if they decided to do something different from 3 years, if that would change.
I don't think so. Because there's everything else is on the ballot, congressional and all that stuff, and constitutional amendments. So Sam, 502,
This again is really allowing the council to, establish the voting locations and whatnot. I mean, I can read it to you, but we're going to follow state law regulating the holding of municipal elections. And in accordance with the ordinances adopted by council, the council will appoint election judges as appropriate and other election officials and establish voting precincts by ordinance. It's an ordinance process that's going to be specific for each election. And we work in coordination with the Hayes County Election Administrator generally to do that, to determine those voting locations.
any questions or thoughts on that section? I'm sorry, Jim,
I
Rob,
want to drill into this just.
go.
Okay, so Sam, where is it that we have that we basically subcontract out to the county to do the elections?
I don't know if that's, I think that's just an interlocal agreement we have. I don't know that we have a specific reference to that in the charter. I think it's just a determination of the city council that it's cost effective and efficient. The county has all the voting equipment, all the systems in
The
place.
reasons for it, I'm
Yes,
just
sir.
going back through where those lines are, because
Right.
I know there's past, I've heard a lot of complaints about timing, things like that that go on, and so I'm drilling down into this a little bit about where the actual, how we hand that off to the county and where that is.
Right, that's done through a contract that's approved by council at a public meeting, is how we've done it in the past.
Okay,
And I think that probably falls under the general, but let me see.
so at this point, we're just kind of keeping it general, it's just. okay,
Yes, sir, I
we're
don't
gonna hold
see-
it, we're the ones responsible, but we're able to, pass that off.
Yeah, because council can decide not to do it with the county if they wanted, if they chose to, they could buy the equipment themselves, have somebody run the
Oh,
election.
I know the difficulties of this.
So that's,
When we're sitting there waiting till 11 o'clock for election results.
Yeah.
All the other issues.
let's put that in the charter. Election results shall be posted by no later than 90 minutes.
There's.
No, I get it.
Reasons for me to dig into that. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, 503, Sam?
503, the big one here is, you must, file for office at least 62 days prior to the election day. That's been the practice, 62 days. Before the election, you have to file, and I think that falls in August usually. That first week in August is typically when candidates have to file.
Is there a reason to change that, to discuss that, or does that seem to work?
So I've never seen anyone raise it as an issue, while I've been here, but
Is that a state?
candidate for office.
There's some state requirements for,
Yeah, we do have to follow state law regardless. What's interesting about this is, in other sections, we refer to state law, and in that one, it's just kind of a standalone. But we would have to follow the election code, even if the charter was different, the election code would supersede any of that.
well, hearing none, anything additional on changing those dates, unless there is. Let's go talk about the ballot itself, 504.
All campaign
Rob?
contribution reports filed by candidates shall be legible. And it's an interesting, that's trying to put at the end of there.
That's an enforcement, I mean, I'm glad to see it there, but I can't read some of them. Legible to me, so that's an enforcement.
They should say tight. There you
Mhm.
go. Why not? I could jump.
It's there's not a template for type. I mean, you can, if you're computer savvy, you can type in your report, but and then you have,
Why don't we just say that it needs to be?
It's on paper.
Like, so it's part of the form. That's what I'm hearing you say. It's part of the form. So that's why they're just.
well, it's a paper form that you turn in that has to be notarized, signed and stamped.
I see.
And I never typed it because I found it easier just to hand write it out. But I agree I think that legible part was added the last time you were on charter review, because I think some of the reports prior to that were absurdly, ridiculously unlegible on purpose.
Yeah.
And
As far as a legal issue, I could see potential claims that,
yeah,
requiring type is a barrier
yeah.
to filing for some people, perhaps, versus handwriting.
Well, it's legible, but
that's the
read
only
as
thing.
much as we.
Could be considered some sort of barrier to.
That's a good point. Good catch, though but having it on paper is, I think, important for, for those that aren't as computer savvy, and I can see where that might be an issue.
Sam's saying there is that, there's that someone's gonna come up.
Yeah.
And I don't have a computer.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's fine. I just, the legible kind of stuck out that. I-
No, that's a
there
good
was
catch.
reason why, Yeah.
Because you can't read some of them.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, some of them were just so absurd.
No, I,
Well, who should catch that? The city clerk when it's turned in?
Yeah, but the city clerk's limited on what they can do in terms of enforcing.
Because I was gonna say, who regulates it? It's not legible, and
Right.
that's to your discretion, and so I might could read it, but you might not be able to, so
Right.
who's discretion?
What you would have to do as city clerk would probably just have to ask them, can you tell us, and we will write it in, we will make note of it. That's what it's going to come down to. The clerk would have to.
Well, and what I thought you were implying, maybe this is wrong, so correct me,
Sure.
that the city clerk sometimes doesn't take the time to do that or have the time to do that. So is this a good suggestion that we say, I mean, is it just silly to say there is a designated person that does that receives all of the applications that people are filing?
That's the clerk. Receives
As
it.
part of her.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what I meant by that is sometimes I think it would be difficult for the clerk to demand that a candidate, like, let's say the candidate says, I think it's legible. And that's where I think, they might work with them and say, we've had some people contact us that can't read it. We'll be happy to make it legible for you. If you want to dictate what it says, we will type it out for you, perhaps. But there's only been a couple of cases, I think, where that's happened. And I think legible is a pretty darn good suggestion to have in your charter. I think that's about as far as we can.
There is at the very end of this, something that says we can make suggestions to council, not about changes in charter, but suggestions regarding patient or something. Maybe we could add a line there, one of our suggestions.
Like a notation comment.
Yeah, I mean, we can, any notations or can be part of our final report.
Yeah, that's section 1212. Item number 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
That this commission.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that was the same reason you brought it is. Yeah, it's kind of a little vague. And you gave me the background about why. Okay, that we had that issue. If there is a workaround, so that's.
All right, Sam, 505.
So, yeah, a couple things, or 505?
Yeah, 505.
Fine.
504.
Okay.
No, wait.
Fine.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah, so
505.
just quickly, 504 is, city elections are considered nonpartisan. Of course, yes, can they be partisan, but in terms of officially, they're not, where people are not designating what party they're with in local elections. So the other thing is, the order of the way your names are placed on the ballot, it's by lot, it's not alphabetical, it's not by incumbent status, so it's kind of random. And then the other thing is, if you're, say you're a council member in place 5 or something, and you're running for reelection, it's saying you need to stay place 5. If you decide to run for mayor, that's different, or if you're a mayoral candidate and now you want to run for a council seat, and of course you could run for any place. That's really the crux of that there.
Okay. Hearing no discussion on that, 505.
Election by majority, we do have runoffs if nobody garners 50% of the vote. Yeah, say 3 candidates, none of them get 50%, right? Get the two highest vote earners, and you can have a runoff election. So you've got to garner a majority of the votes to be a winning candidate. If you're in a field of several candidates, it's 2 candidates, somebody's going to get at least 50%.
Is the runoff no sooner than 20 days and no later than 45 days? Is that state election law?
It's funny that they don't reference that. So I could confirm that if it's state law.
Can you? So, if you get any wiggle room here,
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, I mean, the runoff elections are so, well, they're just so unusual, and most people don't even realize that. Why is there a runoff election? Didn't we just have one? That's usually and so, I guess I would like to know that as well. Does it have to be on a Tuesday? The runoff election, is there a reason why it's, I guess the 20 to 45 days is important, but
Doesn't seem.
it'd be nice if in everyone's mind it was 30 days.
Same. For the one election.
Yeah.
Because we have.
Yeah, this last time was on Saturday. Okay, so that answers that question.
They were usually always on a Saturday run.
But there isn't anything here that says
It
that.
doesn't state it. Maybe
Yeah.
it's just with the pick.
Yeah, I'm just thinking secretaries, the state website, I'm not finding that specific issue.
Well, I'm not sure there's a change to be recommended, but if anybody comes up with a brilliant idea, let us know.
Right.
Or like timing?
It's just, to me, there's almost never a good time, especially in December. But, well, yeah, yeah. No, I know. But I'm not sure ranked choice is legal by the state. by the
It is.
legislature. I know we talked about it at one time.
But it does like negate the whole.
Yeah.
What are you a little bit?
You're in favor of bonds?
Yeah.
I just find that they're expensive.
Sure, but you know what, that's where the underdog gets, he has a shot. That's the, you know, I'm always for the, you know, the guy running against the establishment, and it's, I know it's crazy and everything else, you know, but certainly from the accuracy.
I think it's a fair way.
Yeah. It even still feel good.
Yeah, there's been changes on election day to runoff day. 506 is all city elections governed by the Constitution of the State of Texas. I don't think we're going to change anything there. What about 507, Sam?
Just the canvassing is really where we make it official. We get the election returns and the council conducts a meeting and they bless the returns. Of course, we're relying on the election officials for those returns. And then that's when candidate new members are sworn in or incumbents reelected are sworn in. Take the oath of office.
508.
Can I-
Yeah, sure. Mhm.
This is again, something kind of stuck in me from the, one of the reasons I was asking about with the elections. Is that we had, in this last runoff, you had to wait until that Tuesday for them to get in the ballots that were absentee ballots. Then they went through those absentee ballots. Well, they didn't actually, the elections office did not release that information until almost Friday. So Monday, was it Monday or Tuesday? No, it was Monday. It's when they had, there in December, they were having that special election for the canvassing. So you were right up against, if anyone would have wanted to challenge that, if we would have been down to one vote or we would have been down to zero, you know, this was one of those odd votes, but we were down to 7 votes in that region. And if anyone would have wanted to challenge that, there was no way to do it because of, you know, and it was just they could have had it a day or two earlier was all that just kind of bugged me. It was that the county was there. I don't know. It smacked me of, yeah, let's just get this over with and we don't want to have anything to do with it. Well, you know, if anyone wanted to challenge anything on those couple of votes, you know, it's an odd case. It was a special case, but if somebody wanted to challenge a couple of those votes, we really had no time to do that. Time that when that was released in Kansas. So just a footnote, I don't know. That's where I'm kind of coming in my mind, Sean, around some of these issues. They're just some of the things that came up that I saw with this. That's why I'm asking where some of these things are. Sure.
And there still are remedies, you know, for challenging election results that, you know, recounts, you can ask for recounts, you can challenge the validity of the process. You know, I know there are judicial remedies that people can pursue.
But at the timeline, this, all I was getting at was the timeline they had there with that was
So this says returns of the elections, general and special, shall be presented to the city council on any date permitted by the Texas Election Code, at which time the council shall canvass and declare. So I'm assuming that means that on a date that the council is scheduled to meet, which they have to provide notice for in advance.
Yeah. I mean, they usually sooner than later, and it's typically a special meeting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a pretty broad statement there. Whatever the election code will permit.
So you're saying,
we
Rob,
have to comply with state law, of course.
okay, and you're saying that they canvassed on a Tuesday night,
it was on a Monday. I think it was a special meeting.
Yes, sir.
special meeting?
It was a special meeting for canvassing specifically.
Yep.
And we were right up until Friday with getting that date in. That was just,
I thought that it had something to do with military ballots and something about the
Overseas ballots?
supposed overseas ballots. And then I'm not, don't quote me on this, but it's something to do with the date of the election. I don't know if there was a mistake with the date that they put that absentee ballots had to be in by. Because usually I've never heard the election office say, we're waiting for absentee ballots to come in. I've heard of military ballots, never absentee ballots. So I think that somewhere there must have been a mistake made because they specifically said what you're saying is we have to give them till Monday or whatever day by 5 o'clock or whenever the mail comes to have the absentee ballots. And at that point, they canvass, they waited till that day, like it was like noon or whatever time the mail comes, then that evening, they
Start opening, yeah.
canvassed. So I think that there must have been, because I've never, all the years my mom's worked in election, I've never in my life heard that they were waiting on an absentee ballot. Those have always had to be in by election day. So I think that somehow there might have been a typo or a mistake. So they had to deal with whatever typo because that's what you printed and that's what you sent out and you can't change it if some people have already sent in ballots or whatever. So you're right. I think it was a special case, but I think that there must have been some mistake. Because I've never, all my years, I've never heard of that, ever.
Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, as far as I know, on state law is that it, as long as the absentee ballots are postmarked by election day or on election day, they have to receive those in. So they have to give enough time for those to get through the postal service. So if you mailed it on Saturday, then you have to give till Wednesday usually, for that, for all of those to come. Okay, so you get those in Wednesday, but we wait another couple of days, and I'm not sure the reasons. There's a whole bunch of things there.
Postal service maybe.
And,
I mean,
It's usually
who knows?
But
military
the-
ballots.
that was Lorenzo Gonzalez's runoff,
Yes.
where that came up, and I do remember in the city council chambers that Friday waiting, and then they got the news that late that afternoon, we had the special meeting. But,
So, I would just suggest, Rob, if do you come up with any wording that you think
I'll
at some point, think about it?
It is, but I
Yeah.
think a lot of this, it sounds like these are some things that maybe when we farm this out to the county to do for us as a city. I don't know that we necessarily need to have this in charter. I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around.
Yeah, that might be the ordinance.
While we've got the opportunity, if there's anything that could go in, or whether this just needs to be in that ordinance itself and make sure. Got it covered.
Okay.
It's just, if you think about this, when we had these two people, that if they would have had to do a weekend. You've got Monday, you've got this on a Friday evening. And Monday evening is when, you're coordinated and working. You don't have very much time to go through and look at anything challenging. And say, you can't. So that's all.
Okay. Did you do 508, Sam?
pardon me?
508?
Just, no, oath of office, you hear a lot about oath of office, more recently where, you swore to uphold the Constitution or laws of the state of Texas, and sometimes people try to use that to, have somebody removed from office, but, we all gotta take the oath of office in Texas, right?
We take an oath to an office, not a person. Okay. 601.
So we talked briefly about this. This is power of initiative. We've seen this in San Marcos a few times, even since I've been here. People reserve the power of direct legislation by initiative and may propose any ordinance or repeal any ordinance, not in conflict with the charter, constitution, or state laws. That requires a petition signed by at least 10% of the qualified voters of the city. And that's usually determined by the most, recent voter rolls. So we'll have those numbers. We get those from the county. the thing there is, just because it's in the charter doesn't mean it's valid, right? So that voters could propose something that does not conform with state law or federal law for that matter. And in those cases, sometimes it would be an invalid ordinance, for example.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Any questions on 601? If not, we'll go to 602. Did I hear? No, 602?
All right, 602, there, the voters may approve or reject at the polls any legislation enacted by the council, which is subject to the initiative process. So what I think is important there is that generally you're talking about things that are subject to the initiative process. For example, we have the marijuana ordinance that was passed, or just a regulatory ordinance of the council versus an ordinance like granting a zoning request. That typically would not be subject to the referendum process, right? But general regulations that apply to everyone would be the types of ordinances and laws that are subject to referendum. Again, petition at least 10% of the qualified voters. City clerk has to certify, and that's a tricky process, right? We've had numerous situations where people don't submit a proper petition, and it's a hard job. It takes a lot of work from city clerk's office, but for good reason. You've got to assure everyone that the people who signed it are actually voters in San Marcos.
You can't leave it on the counter at
Right.
the local burger joint and it doesn't.
So, for example, here's an example, you can't have the person getting the signatures attest later. They witness the person, they verify their identity and all that. That's like you say, you can't leave it at the counter. You got to be in person, verify their identity, get their address. And then the clerk can then run through the voter rolls and confirm that they are actually registered voters.
Okay, this one says 30 days. Was that one of those things
Yeah.
that we had talked about?
Yeah, we did. And we talked about it at length. I think Yancey,
Yes.
and we kind of had a consensus for a change of that for, I'm not sure.
I had a
thought it was
notation
90 days.
90 is what I had in my notes, but yeah, it certainly that
Yeah, it was 90 days.
He wanted on that one.
90 days.
He said it wasn't enough time.
There was two of us that said 90, the rest said 60.
Shoot.
Yeah.
I thought we all.
that's what I had.
They're going.
I think we all should not be.
I
thought I did.
No, that's fine. I've got 60 crossed out and 90, so it's probably.
Yeah, that was on the 13th. We talked about petition requirements, the initiative, and Yancey, was it you that brought up the suggestion to extend that?
Yeah, because she said that it wasn't enough time if someone really wanted to do something, and by the time you have to get the amount of signatures, then get certified and all that, it wasn't enough time to do it.
Yeah, I think we came up with the 90-day
Okay,
suggestion.
that's good by me. Let's get that.
And so that'll come back to us in formal suggestion, proposed amendment. Okay, Sam, could you jump to 603, please? Because I have one for that.
So thing there is, main thing there is, if you're going to propose an ordinance that you want the voters to consider, this is saying that you shall provide the full text of the legislation in the form of an ordinance, including a descriptive caption. And I see reasons for that from the legal side is an ordinance, the people need to know what they're voting on. And but it also needs to come from the group circulating the petition, because if they have to leave it up to us to interpret what their intention is, that could get us into all kinds of issues, because, well, do they mean this or do they mean that? And then say we try and rewrite the ordinance for them to make it valid. Well, first of all, are we getting involved in a partisan matter because now the legal department's making sure the ordinance is valid or whatever? It's tricky. And I think that's the justification for that, but there may be other points of view on that.
But I think that actually came up with the fluoride thing, because what they submitted said there will be no fluoride in the water. But there's natural fluoride in the water, so what they really meant was could be added. But I don't know how that correction got made.
Well, there was actually some litigation, and then there was sort of a settlement reached where it came up with some language. I can't remember, that was during your tenure?
Yeah.
And so that was
I'm sorry, John, it just.
But, yeah, so
much.
that was a tough situation, but they did come up with a compromise where they agreed to some wording and finally made it. But yes, so that's.
Yeah.
And yes, there are gonna be situations where we're gonna look at an ordinance, say, the way it's proposed, it's unenforceable or.
It was just the suggestion that I was in favor of leaving fluoride in so that I could further my water treatment business.
I forgot.
And that I was profiting off of fluoride because some filters that I sell remove fluoride. I did have a suggestion on, on I think it's on 603 or 602, I'm not sure. But one of the suggestions that I had was, and it was somewhat related to referendums that were proposed in the past, was that the group that is, I guess, behind the people that are doing the referendum process have to disclose the funding that they're getting, just like a candidate would have to propose, have to fill out a form saying, here's the contributions that we're getting on this particular referendum. It has to be legitimate and typed.
Where would that? Yeah.
I don't know if it would go. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's kind of how you look at it. There are groups where they're wanting to repeal legislation, and that's kind of referendum. And then there's groups that are proposing new legislation that it may be that you.
Well, I wanted to bring it before the group to see if there's any interest in if that being a good idea. I always thought it was, because during that litigation, for instance, we found out that there was or during one of them, I can't remember what it was, but there was petition drives and there were people funding it, like paying per signature. Yeah. And so we wanted to know, because
I think that's important because that would.
It's legal, I'll tell you, because, okay, so if you.
and I'm not claiming it's illegal.
Right, if you got X amount of days, you've got to get out there and get signatures. There are people that will go out there that know the rules, know the law, know exactly how to do this. That you contract out for them to help you get those signatures.
So you're not paying the people who are signing it, you're paying the people who are taking it house to house.
Right, but those groups get paid per signature. Okay, so if.
And these were not super small numbers either. And so one of the things that we thought was, well, you can imagine any organization that, let's say, is being funded, just thinking one off the top of my head, we want to prohibit electric vehicles on the streets of San Marcos or whatever, and it's funded by automobile companies that
Right.
only make
Yes.
internal combustion engines, you know, and they're funding. And I'm not saying that would happen, but it could happen. And it just seems to me that it's a small thing to file some sort of disclosure as the funders of this petition or referendum drive. And I don't know.
I never knew that, so I would be awful leery to put my name on something if I wasn't agreeable with who's funding it.
Yeah, and just like with it can assist you in your decision to vote, because you're gonna have to go vote on this anyways, just like your candidate filings, and that certainly, you know, where are you getting your money from? You know, who's funding it?
Requiring it of candidates for a financial disclosure. Yes, it presents a barrier to the grassroots that wants to do this, but then on the other side of it, I think if it's not any more onerous than if I was to go run for city council and have to file a financial disclosure. I don't see, I see a fairness level there.
Yeah, and I think that the city, rather than us determining what that disclosure looks like and the information, that's something that the city council can create.
Yeah.
If it passed. So
So you're asking for a financial disclosure from
monetary donations to, or monetary contributions, however it's, whatever the right language would be.
Ten petitions?
Well, you said one was to,
Generally, the referendum is, you know, repealing legislation. It's usually proposing new.
But do they also do the same thing if they're trying to repeal legislation?
Well, you have to get 10%. It's the same process of getting 10% of people to sign. So they're,
so we're giving them an extra 60 days to do this work. So I think it's reasonable.
That's kind of where I'm coming from.
reasonable to extract. So I would say it would be in both sections as a one sentence. And if it's all right, I'll get with Sam over the next week or
so
so.
we'll do track changes, kind of like I did on these other ones, where we can insert some possible wording on.
Is that clear?
602 and 603.
You have a pretty
Financial disclosures.
Yeah. filed with the city clerk. That way the citizens have access. That way the citizen, it's just a transparency thing.
I see a balance.
Yeah.
Okay, if we're going to 90 days. Okay, and if it is, as I said, it's no more onerous than if I'm running for city council.
Yeah.
I think, and you know, I don't, just, you're right, let them figure it out, but just keep it simple. You know, and I think that's it, just who's the funding source for, you know, whatever. So,
Yeah, and I don't know, the only other thing I'll say is I don't know if there's any state form, because like the city council forms that are filled out, those are the Texas Ethics Commission forms. So
okay.
those are produced by the state government. So I don't know if there may be already something at the Texas Ethics.
To go by. Okay.
Yeah, they may already have, because I'm sure this has come up. We're not the first city that's,
Not there.
yeah. All right.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
You brought it back up again. So it's qualified voters, 10% of the qualified voters of the city. Now, that's not registered, it's qualified.
There's some case law on that, and that issue has come up before, but it does mean you have to be a registered voter and a legal registered voter. Okay, if we were able to uncover that you were registered under a false name or with an
Yeah.
improper address or whatever, yes, of course, like anything, you can challenge that, but it generally means registered voter.
And that's fine. You're
Yes,
the
sir.
one with legal knowledge. I just.
Yeah, that issue's come up before, and qualified does mean registered.
Okay, all right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. 604, Sam.
Okay, here's the deal here. Council can do a couple of things with a petition, right? They can pass the ordinance without amendment and avoid the election altogether. So they see something council could decide for themselves, yeah, that's a great idea. Why have an election? We have the power to adopt the ordinance today, right? But otherwise, they need to call the election. And again, that goes back to the 62 days. Let's see, call an election on the adoption of the ordinance without amendments to be held on the next uniform election date authorized by state law for municipal elections, which is at least 62 days after the date on which the council acts. So again, the point being is we want to call the election when we're calling the elections for council members. And that is going to be early August. So that's another reason it's important to get petitions in with a certain amount of time, because we need time to count those signatures by August, by that August date when we're going to call the election.
So is there something that you're suggesting that we do on that, or?
I don't have any suggestions.
Okay. Okay. Anybody have any questions on that then?
Okay, but. Go ahead. No, he got me thinking because he's saying that there's a certain time, so if we change something to 90 days or I'm off on something, is that gonna mess up the time?
No,
Okay.
the 90 days for them to,
For the referendum.
right.
It moves back their start date. Because it
Yeah.
was basically it. But, so that's, so we're still saying it's gonna have to be August.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be. So yeah, they would just have to reconcile the two to make it work. I don't know, it's an inherent conflict.
So pass your worst ordinances then.
At the
in
election, council may, should that be shall? May,
Maybe there'll be option, may or may not. Shall means that.
What paragraph is that?
That's paragraph on 6.04. That starts at the election.
Oh, don't they have the option?
Still submit.
Shall makes them do it. Or do
Yeah, but I
they
think
have
they have
to do
to
it?
submit it, but they can also.
They can also just,
In other words,
You say shall, it says they have to do it without amendment, so it
So-
says may, it's giving them options.
So under the first part, so within 30 days after the certification, the council shall either, pass the ordinance or call the election on that ordinance without amendments. At the election, the council may submit the initiated ordinance without amendment and an alternative. I think all that's really saying is that they may submit that alternative ordinance along with the one that's proposed by the petition.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the proceeding
Shall.
does make it a shall as to the submitted ordinance. But council can come up with their own. It's like, we got a better one, or the.
so both of them could be on the ballot?
That's correct.
So if
I would really confuse voters, but I could see the logic. It's like, well, if we're gonna get into that subject matter, well, we want to propose an alternative. I could see that. I don't know if it's ever happened. I'm not aware of it, but
yeah, I could see if people couldn't come together on some wording or something. I don't know, but yeah, I think that makes sense. Anything else on 604? Oh, yeah, we have section. The rest of that, section B and C.
Yeah, the second 30 days. That we have to change that.
well,
Or no.
on that one again, it's council can say, all right, we've received your petition. We'll go ahead and we're gonna repeal the ordinance. But again, they can call the election. It's just they need to make that decision within 30 days
Okay.
after receiving. But again, if you're gonna call the election, it's still gonna have to fall within that timeline for calling the election. It's usually gonna be November unless, of course, a special election is called, right? But the way they held it, they write, it's to be held on the next uniform date authorized by state law for municipal elections. Which is, and this one's interesting, which is at least 45 days from the date on which the council acts. I think that might be an issue because
Well, there's a May,
it's 62 days on everything else.
and we've had elections in May for voter approved bonds. So I think it's just a matter of, I see it,
Did we not do away with May elections, or we still have an option?
it's a uniform election day. The school board votes in May.
And it's a choice for us as a city,
Not,
as a council.
not for city council races, but for special purpose elections, bond elections.
Or, well, could this also fall into that? Or do these have to be on the November ballot?
Well, the way it's written, right? Well, I would say this is November because it's the next uniform date for municipal elections.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
not city council elections, municipal elections. So May could actually still
Yeah, that's what I'm.
be a possibility.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I see that would be really interesting.
But see, on here, when you were saying the 62 days, is there some different, because it says authorized by state law for municipal elections, which is at least 45 days. So what makes it different than the 62?
Well, the November elections, we usually call the election in August, 62 days. So that is a little bit of an interesting distinction why this one is only at least 45 days, because that probably wouldn't work for November elections.
That's what I'm saying. This
Yeah.
doesn't-
Okay, so there's two rules here, really. See, that's one of them right there.
I
The
just see
other
that
is
it's not
interesting.
uniform if you're saying 62 over here, but if there's a specific reason that this is 45, other than, because I notice it says municipal elections.
Right.
So there must be a different state law for municipal elections opposed to.
I actually don't know what the logic was for having 45 and 62.
Could you,
I don't know if that came up in your last 21, but
no,
you're quite the distinction.
no. Could you maybe do some research?
Sure, I'll look at the
Report back to us.
too, see if that's controlling you.
We can always come back to that one.
Okay, do y'all realize what we just said, that if that next uniform date does allow for a May election, someone could come in conceivably, given them 90 days now, to get enough signatures. The 8,000, 5,000, whatever signatures you need, 10%. You get all that, you get everything. We could be going to a May election possibly. Or can city council put that? Well, no, because this is saying it's gonna have to be held on the next uniform date. So if you back it up enough from that you could be having a May election and no one in the city is, wait a minute, for a referendum, recall, whatever it may be. That's an interesting scenario in my mind.
Wasn't the fluoride thing in May? I mean, I know the bond election,
That's a good question.
the bond election was 2017 bond election for the fire stations.
Show up.
Yeah, if you don't have the bond, now, yes, but then it would just, it would be kind of a weighted, it's those that can get out and vote, basically. It's gonna be a low voter turnout. And those that can get out that vote, if you're keyed up with a bond election, okay, then, there's gonna be people out there possibly, but it's still gonna be a low voter turnout. It's just a scenario that I'm just walking through in my head right now. That's really interesting one that, yes, if I'm looking to game the system, okay,
Everybody else does.
yes.
Why don't we have him do some research and then, just in case we're not talking about scenarios that could actually happen.
Well, you're saying that if you actually do this, and it's within that allotted time by law and what's in the charter, then it can
You
happen.
can have a May election,
You
and I
can
think
have
you're
a May
right, Mr.
election.
Tomatis, I think that does
Well-
sound familiar that the fluoride wasn't.
It might,
in a-
that might make sense because if your petition, if your city council passes a bonehead ordinance in July, there's no way you're gonna get your signatures and
Yeah.
certified by the August date to, make the November election. So would you make it wait a whole year? Probably not. You would probably want to get that one over with if it was a valid petition or referendum. But let's move forward
Thank you.
and come back to it. Sam, 605.
Any number of ordinances may be voted on at the same election. Well, makes sense, it's just indicating that if a majority of the legal votes cast in favor of initiated ordinance, it shall be effective as an ordinance of the city when the result of the election is declared. So when the votes are canvassed, it's just saying it's going to be treated like any other vote. You're going to canvass the votes, and if the initiated ordinance passes, it passes.
Which is the way we would expect it to.
Now, here's what's interesting. This is where limitations were placed on the council's ability to repeal as citizen initiated ordinances, right? An ordinance adopted through the initiative process may be repealed or amended at any time after the expiration of 2 years by a vote of 3/4 of the council members. What are they saying? They're saying, hey,
We could put fluoride back in.
so that's what it's basically saying. Look, they don't want to make it too easy for council to overturn a voter initiative. They want to at least have that 2-year period.
Not-
And I don't know, was that in 21, that wasn't.
No, I don't think-
It looks, yeah, it doesn't look like. That was when-
I didn't know that.
Wow, so council could undo that one right now.
Yep. We could have,
Marijuana?
and then
But it
I could
does
have
require
so much more money.
That's
By
required.
a super majority. So even after the 2 years, but
It's still a super majority.
That's interesting.
You know?
yeah, so there's that ability.
All right. Anybody want to change that? Let's go to 606.
No, but I did want to ask.
Yeah.
So then they have to take, if it is passed, council has to take that under consideration. They can't change anything to that. They have to accept it.
Well,
Yeah.
a couple things there. A city can, if the city determines that an ordinance that was passed by the voters is, say, unconstitutional or illegal, contrary to state law, they could refuse to adopt it. So in other words, it passes, the voters approving, the council could have an affirmative action to, well, that's great, but on its face, it's invalid. We're not going to adopt it. What happens in that case is the group that is proposing the ordinance or groups that are supportive could file a lawsuit to compel adoption, things like that. Or vice versa, the city also could have the option of going to court, to have a court declare whether it's valid or not valid, like a declaratory judgment. Court, we have this ordinance that voters initiated, we think it has some issues, but can you tell us? And that way it takes the city out, it's like, okay, the court's telling us it's valid or it's invalid. So, for example, so we have the, y'all are familiar with the marijuana, it's called the marijuana ordinance, but we just had a hearing at the Court of Appeals on that. It was approved by the voters. The council didn't deem it necessary to declare any of it specifically invalid one way or the other. It's state of Texas stepped in and says, we believe it's contrary to state law. And so that's in the court right now. If the court tells us, then fine. If the court tells us, we'll of course not
Thank you.
enforce it.
And just I wanted, again, while.
Yeah, so the city does have options. The city is not in a position where their hands are absolutely tied. Like if there's some ordinance that's just egregiously, invalid or unconstitutional, yes, there's always remedies for the city.
Just like they passed the marijuana thing, but the city council said, we're not voting for it because it's against state law. So they wouldn't implement it or whatever. They refused.
And it just goes to show how lawyers can all look at the same thing and have different views of it, right? That's why we're in court, why people are in court. So
So let's talk 606.
Thank you for.
I mean, section A is pretty straightforward. The city shall have the power to recall any elected officer.
that's the 10% threshold again.
Yeah, but go into section B real quick, second line, second sentence. Any recall petition form supplied by the city clerk shall be valid for 45 days. That means the petition is dated at the top and you gotta get those signatures in by 45 days, or
They have to change to 90 if that's what we're saying.
What does that mean after they turn it in?
I don't know. It says the recall petition form supplied by the clerk shall be valid for 45 days from the date of its issuance.
So in this case, we're only giving 40.
So we would have to change that to 91 because
You.
I don't know what that-
Have to, but it depends.
Well, the referendum is 90 days after it's passed.
Okay.
It was 30 days, first off, after it was passed, that you had your chance to organize an effort to repeal it. This is a little different. This is power of recall, which is, an earthquake in your city government.
But is this saying you only have 45 days to get the signatures?
I think that's what it says, because there's an issuance and an expiration date. And a time. And a time shall be noted on the petition form. All such forms be returned to the city clerk before their expiration date in order to be eligible to be verified. So they don't have to be verified by the clerk, but I'm wondering if this just says, okay, here's your petition form. And it's got 10 lines on it for people to sign, and up above it has the ordinance that you're asking the people to approve or put on the ballot, right? Because recall has to go to the ballot, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is to get on the ballot?
But it says it's only good for 45 days. But if we're giving people 90 days to sign a petition or.
Yeah, but
whatever they're
is that
doing,
just one page of it? In other words, I go to the city clerk, hands me this. It's got 10 lines. I can't get 10 signatures in 45 days? Is the next one?
Or is it all?
Well, you
Is it all-
10%. You need
The whole signature.
So do you need 10% within? It doesn't say that.
I think
Yes,
the
it's fine.
form,
That's fine.
so the form.
Ah.
The form will obviously have to be appended because it's not gonna, to get 10% of the voters, they're gonna give you the basic form and then, of course, you're gonna supplement it. But I think that cover page to the form is what it's really talking about. It's that cover page, here's the form.
So it's
Take
45.
time. You may add 50 pages to it. By the time you get 10% signatures of 10%, it's gonna be like this. But I think it's that basic
The whole thing.
cover sheet. So
Yeah, you're-
Does the city clerk say at the time of issuance what 10% is? Because we fluctuate.
no,
10% of
we
who
wait till
vote.
We don't do it at the front end. We do it when they're counting. They get the voter.
I thought it was 10% of the voters who voted in the last election. That's
That's what they go
qualifies.
by. Yes, that's what they go by.
And does the person know that when they're issued the
Yeah.
form?
They might say, like 10,100
But this is
people.
all, because if we read it, it says that they all have to be dates in order to be eligible to be verified and certified by the city clerk, so that would mean all the
It
pages.
says of the qualified voters of the city.
I think
Right.
qualified
They
means,
have to be registered. Okay, so it isn't who just voted in the last election. Because that's a different number. if we
Well,
get
I think this goes back to my request earlier, this is what I was asking earlier about being qualified and registered. And that was where we said Sam's gonna go off and this a little bit.
could you get us some information on the term qualified voter?
Yeah. So it is registered voters. I guess the question is,
So
ten
for,
percent of the voters who voted in the last election is different than 10% of the registered voters.
Yes.
so registered equals qualified.
Yes, sir. That,
Okay.
that case law is clear on that, because that's
Okay,
come up.
thank you.
And the clerk would definitely have that number.
Yes.
If we change that wording, we're confused by it. Shouldn't we change qualified to registered?
Thank you, you mean.
Qualified slash registered.
I don't know. I mean, can we change that?
Well, they would be
I mean,
explained.
if you're not registered to vote, you're not qualified to be voting, like, it's just,
I mean, the qualifications may change.
Let's be pretty hardcore about this in specific. I think it should say registered. Why wouldn't it?
Unless there's any legal, I think, yeah, that's why I was just the qualified versus, you were saying more.
Yeah, it
That's
is
not-
interesting why they use the word qualified, and I don't know the history of that, but your logic is, yeah, they're registered, but they also have to be lawfully registered, I guess you could get into
Well, I'm
that,
not
but
necessarily going that route, but
Or-
I'm just saying it is qualified versus registered. And then that timing threshold that they're bringing up, I think is critical because if we're saying last election versus now, when maybe we had a registration drive and between the last election, a lot of people got registered for some reason or another, that could change the numbers and what list are we going on? Is the question here to say qualified.
That's why we
No,
need.
I think qualified means you're 18 and you could vote if you wanted to, you have to register.
no, and that's the thing, the case law is pretty clear. Qualified means registered.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an
clear.
issue we've had to research before.
because you wouldn't be qualified if you were.
Okay, so if qualified is registered, do we want to change the 45 days?
It would have to be because it's saying with the 45 days, it's saying that you'd have to have it all turned in so that they could check all of the signatures and all that. So that doesn't, I don't think that means the very front page. I
No,
think
yeah,
it
it's
means
everything.
All of it,
Yeah.
it's everything.
Everything.
So if we're gonna put 90 over there, you have to put 90 here, either there's a conflict.
Well,
Not necessarily.
not necessarily, because it's apples and oranges. The ones we're talking about here is a recall of a specific member of the city council versus a ordinance recall.
A referendum.
We can, if you want to do 90, okay, I'm just in my mind, they're two different things, but if you want to do 90 for that to make it consistent,
I-
Is the 45 just there or is it state?
I can certainly look at that, but I have a feeling it's local. It's just the charter.
Might be the way other cities do. I,
Because usually everything else says state of,
yeah,
you know.
state, laws of the state. I would just say that I get it. 45 days is really tough, but it probably should be. You're talking about, again, that would be like the biggest earthquake to happen in the city government is to have an elected official who was maybe just elected. And their first vote, let's say, riled people up. I almost feel like it should be really hard to do it. There's other, I don't think so. I've never, not in my knowledge.
Never.
And there's other places in the charter where council behaviors, like if it's a felony, convicted of a felony, you're out. That's in there. So there are some other safeguards. That's just my feeling.
I think it should be too, because you get up there and you make a decision, but you have a reason for making it, then all of a sudden people just want to vote you out after one decision. They should really want to do this, have to work to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it should be a monumental there should be something just like no brainer to do this. But the other thing is, I don't want to terrorize my elected officials, you know? I want them to take hard votes. I want them to look their constituents in the eye and say, I just disagree with you. For the good of the city, I think my conscience tells me all the research that I've done, this is what we have to do. That's what I want out of it elected. And how rare is that for that even to happen? Everybody always says, gee, we just wish people would,
And one thing,
not be so political and just, not worry about their next election, but the next generation. How many times have you heard that?
Feel that it's that 45 days, which is half of the 90 days we're giving, saying, okay, for 90 days for a referendum. But if it's a recall, no, you have that time to get the signatures.
My feeling is, since it's never proven to be a problem, I think we can think about changing it. If the reality calls for it, I don't see the need to never change it. I mean, I'm okay if you guys want to go with 90, but I'm totally okay to leave it. You don't see me.
Okay, I think I'm hearing it's a tough hill to climb, but I think it was probably put in there for a reason.
Put in the effort and you're gonna get
Yeah, I think you'll get it done.
I need to sign that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the power recall, the recall election, I guess just to determine that's with state law. By state law for municipal elections, 62 days. So I'm gonna jump to 608, the results, that's just the same. The vote is the vote, right? The result is the result.
and there's some wisdom in here, the council member who was removed from the recall cannot be a candidate in the. Makes sense. So what was the point otherwise, right? I think somebody was wise when they thought of it.
Yeah, back in 2006. Yeah, it makes sense. 609, limitation on recall, okay. Person shall. Oh, within 6 months of taking office, okay, well, that busts my argument. No member should be subjected to more than one recall. I would hope not.
Because no, it's not good.
Can you imagine?
There's some Texas towns.
Yeah.
Here's a lot of it, and there's smaller towns, but it's where they've recalled every single one of them. And then they
Wasn't it a school board or something?
Yeah, it was something
It was something
crazy.
crazy. Yeah, I remember that.
I just feel like most elected officials, when they see that fire flame coming and the pitchforks and torches, they're gonna perk up and, even if they were, there's just so little political courage anyways.
The wording we have here. So
Yeah, I'm good with it.
that's at 6 days.
I'm kind of glad we left the 45 days.
6 months. I was at 6 months.
610, Sam, what?
On that one, I did receive some feedback from the city clerk on this one, and she would like y'all to consider on subsection A, within 45 days after the petition is filed, the clerk shall determine whether the petition is properly signed by the requisite number of qualified voters. She's indicated that sometimes that is very challenging when you're trying to get 10%, and it's a resources issue. How many staff you have, you got to do all your other jobs, you got to do the council meetings. And there would be some time limits that are just by the nature of the process, she would have to get it done by a certain date. For example, she can't, we have to call the election, for example, a November election by first week in August. So in some situations, that 45 days, she may just not have a choice. She's going to have to count those, but she would like to just eliminate having a number of days requirement at all.
No.
So I'm just conveying. Some cities do that, some don't.
I
So-
think we should give it over an end.
No.
No way.
Yeah.
That's
Maybe if
crazy.
you
Well, I just wanted to share
increase
that.
it to
No, I-
60 or put
Yeah, I
some
mean-
on
Did she want to increase it, or she just didn't want to have it all?
I thought he was coming with 60 days.
Yeah. I did.
Oh, 60.
Well, that might,
Because then it
That
could
might
just take
help.
forever.
right.
Or they-
Why would you go an end date?
Or they wouldn't do it.
Some cities don't have that time frame at all, but, and I have research that she indicated that to me, but,
How many-
60 days be a.
Well, let me ask you a question, Sam. How many, since we had marijuana and we had fluoride, are those the only two in the last 10 years?
I can't think of another one, actually.
I mean, this is not something she's doing every quarter.
No, we had the civil service, there was a repeal of civil service, but it didn't get the required signatures. Now, that one's a little different, because that had to do with, the chapter 143 of the local government code, which had a specific election requirement to repeal civil service that supersedes our charter requirements. So that one was a little different. And
Was that the cops contract when?
yeah, there was a petition, but there weren't enough signatures.
Yeah.
And the reason was, they thought that the 10% of the qualified voters was all that they had to meet, but the threshold under chapter 143 was higher. And it was a state law which overrode.
That's why they call them civil service protections.
Oh,
So
Thank you.
I'm certainly not in favor of a no number. I'm kind of fine with the 45 days, but because I've seen it, I've seen Jamie Case do it twice. And, yeah, it was work.
I know that they said it was difficult, that's why I don't have a problem, I'll go with 45, but I understand what they're saying, she has council meetings, they have all their other duties that they do. That office doesn't have that much staff, so allowing them an extra 15 days just to get it done. Cause you're having to check for vote, making sure everything's legit, so I don't have a problem extending it, I just think it would be a problem with no end date. Like, no, that I would be uncomfortable with. That's just
I'm with
me.
you. I'm okay to extend to 60. And I think seeing that they've made a comment about it, they're saying this would help our job. Help us do it more efficiently.
Okay, so I think I saw you shake your head, Yancy, in the affirmative. So I think I'm hearing 3 at 60. Anybody else?
stay up, I'll go with 60.
Okay. Okay, so Sam, I think you have your direction there for 610, first page, change 45 to 60. Okay. Okay, let's go to 611, please.
here we go with the non-binding. We talked about this the other day, and I think that example was the property where the Woods Apartments are now. There was a non-binding proposition. Voters, I believe that was the one. And how do you feel about this? We're gauging the sentiment of the voters. I don't know if there's anything out of the ordinary here.
This just says that they can do it.
Yeah. It just gives the council the option to test the water.
And section 1 through 5 is just the nuts and bolts process of it.
Right.
Non-binding.
Place it on the ballot. Now, what it does say, the council shall not call election at any time solely for the purpose of placing one or more non-binding propositions. I'd say that's probably the big one right there.
Yeah. You got a lot.
That's- we want to have it during when a regular election, and partly that may be logical just because of the cost issue. I don't
I'm
know
sure.
what the reasoning was, but that was.
Remember the non-binding to purchase Ocarina Springs,
That's big.
and it passed. Like overwhelmingly passed.
For the city to purchase.
Yeah, I think it was four. They had a non-binding referendum that passed. And I think it was like $4 million back then. The whole deal, golf course, everything. Anyway, so non-binding stuff doesn't always happen.
Well, what it was a great little thing. I think now would be. Still all in intention. Yeah.
It's serious.
Golf course, athletic field.
But
golf-
that's, it's good for us to think about these things. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and then, as he said, the Woods Apartments was non-binding. It passed. Didn't didn't happen. For the city to acquire that as well. 701, Sam.
So this is really.
Oh,
Yeah, Yancy.
That 45 days over to 60,
Well,
or does it say 45 days?
supplementary petitions filed. About the same issue. Having to count 10%. Although this is interesting,
I would say. to keep it six. But it could be.
2016.
Well, is this 60 days after the petition is filed? Oh, yeah, 60 days after an initiative referendum or petition.
Yeah, and the simplicity, right? Like, if they see one number and that's all you gotta worry about. You're,
Yeah, that makes sense. So unless you see a conflict between those two,
right?
it'd both be at 60.
Yeah, and the only issue there is, when the petition is filed and how close you are to that deadline to call the election, right? So, but that would be just by the nature of the calendar is going to determine that. That's in those cases, they're going to have to just,
So get your recall petitions in by June.
right?
Start them in April. You have, let's start by April and you'll be able to get it done. All right, 701, Sam.
So one of the things there is, the Planning and Zoning Commission right now provides for staggered 3-year terms. But one of the changes I think might have been in your last charter commission, right, is that no action of the commission shall have any force or effect unless it is adopted by a vote of 5 or more members. When I first started here, under Robert's rules, say you have 9 members, but say only 7 show up. Under Robert's rules, a majority of the 7 could carry the day. So you could get 4 votes to approve a zoning request, for example. Yeah, you could have 5. And that actually happened since I've been here. We've had that situation. So 5 members could have zoning matters. So somewhere along the way, somebody decided we should at least get a majority
Yeah,
of
that was our-
the total membership.
That was our group.
Okay. And then, so there's any changes there, all commission members must have resided in the city for a period of 5 years. And that was something we discussed in our first meeting. And we know that we can't impose that kind of requirement for elected officials because of the election code. There's no prohibition that I'm aware of on having that for appointed officers of the city.
I have a question on that one. 5 years, is pretty steep. Is there anybody have any thoughts on that?
It's pretty steep. Yeah, I wish we could apply that to council and not P and Z, but, I think it's a little steep. 3 might be more.
I thought we had this conversation one time and they said that it gave people the opportunity that if you've lived here, you kind of know the area, you kind of know what people are talking about. I don't know.
There was a conversation. I think
There was a conversation that just a lot of people thought that 5 years was like way too long to put on to say like, in order to be on P and Z, you would have had to be a resident of San Marcos for at least 5 years. But then some people thought, well, if you go to 3 or 2, you have someone, it's like city council, really, they move in, they might not really know the city. I don't know what the reasoning were, but I've heard a lot of conversation
Is 5 is too long or?
that it was sufficient.
Oh.
And
Because
then
there's
there's
no,
some residency here to get a feel for the city, a vibe for what's going on, what might be best.
So my,
I do understand 5 might be steep, so maybe 3 is better, but I do think it should be more than 1 year. I know
Okay,
city
okay.
council is only 1 year, and I think that is why we have so much discrepancy between. Says recommends it's a good idea, as a good idea, and the city council's like, no. Because people on city council have been here so long, they might be a bit confused.
so I'm wondering and I don't know when the 5 year might have come in. I suspect I know when it came in, Coach Jones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Would be my guess. But I'm kind of wondering, I can think of a scenario in my mind where, someone moves from, say, New Braunfels, who's a renowned architect or a renowned, city planner from another city and says, hey, I'd like to join your planning commission. And obviously that person would likely be a great addition and, but we'll see in the next century, in the next decade.
So John, where are we at on this as far as?
I mean,
are we leaning towards the 3 or are we sticking with the 5?
I mean, I just wanted to gauge, see what anybody thought on it. I kind of think 3 would seem more reasonable to me. That's just a steep climb. I know it's an important board, all of the P and Z members, but come on. I mean, it's like, it really limits the people you can appoint.
It does. We've had a couple good people that want to have it like that here time.
Probably expand your,
You think 3?
I see the value of 5, so that you get a feel for what's really going on, but how long does it take to get that feel? 5 maybe.
two, okay. We got a 2. I've heard 3 and I've heard, anybody want to stay at 5?
I don't, what's that?
Anybody want to stay at 5?
5, I understand 5.
Yeah, I get it.
I really understand 5. I don't have a problem with 3, but after being on there, I understand the value of 5.
Yeah, I
get it.
said I'd go with 3 and that's what most fun, but I get the 5.
Well, I had no particular motivation on it, but tell us why.
3, but probably not less than 3, definitely not 1. Because it's just so much. I mean, like I've been on there 2 years, but every meeting or every time something happens, it's like you're realizing that there's something else that you need to go learn more about or that you need to get a feel for. And it's a lot. And I've been here my whole life. So I understand the value of the 5.
Yeah, I think I'm.
Does
I
that
don't have
come,
a problem with 3.
does that come from like the learning aspect? By living here longer, are you gonna automatically know that when you, so like if I lived here, I've lived here 11 years. if I were to jump into planning and zoning, would I automatically have all these things that the extra time is allotting for, or is that something that I just need to learn on my own because of planning and zoning? You see what I'm saying?
I think that what I'm trying to say is people that have not lived here. So maybe you haven't heard all the things that's going on. Just for example, Cape's Dam.
Right.
There's new people that are here. Well, I don't understand what the big deal is. And then I noticed Sunday in the Daily Record, it says Cape's Dam from the beginning, trying to get people brought up to speed on what's really happening. So when you're having to make decisions on things that you've heard about forever and you have a good feel of what it's about or what it might do or, you know, what all's involved, someone that's been here a year, 2 years, like I'm telling you, I know people that have been here for 5 years, they're looking at me going, what's Cape's Dam? What are they even talking about?
Exactly, so why is it 5 years needed?
Because they have no idea.
Well,
They have, you don't have any idea of what people are even talking about or what's happening in your city. That's the only thing, that's what we were saying with city council. I'm not knocking it, because you can run, do whatever. Like, I don't have a problem with it. It's just that sitting back and looking at it, people that move into this town and you want to be on city council, you haven't even lived here a year, you're here making decisions for people that have lived here forever. But what are your decisions based on? Because we've seen it in the past and then they don't last long. Because, and I think it's not good because I think that they would have been a good council person had they had a little more background or known what people really like. You know what I'm saying? Because just like you start dealing with Cape's Dam, you talk about the river, you talk about things that are really important. But if you've not lived here and you don't know,
like you said it yourself,
Back of flooding.
like if you've never lived here and all this flooding and all these other things that have happened, and if you've never lived through it, but you come in and you make a decision for us, but we lived here and we see people that have lost their homes, lost all this stuff that they have no idea.
okay, but what I'm saying is, you said it yourself, you know people who've been here for 5 or more years who don't know a thing about what's going on, so how is it 5 years older than this? If.
Just
What
gives you an idea.
What if for opportunity, you know, someone who could live here for 2 years, I just feel like the 5 years. I'm all for accessibility, I think the 5 years really cuts it. And that's why I'm not for that, and I think maybe 3, I'd be okay with 3, but definitely for me 2. Because there might be people here who have lived maybe not that long, 1 or 2 years, but who are interested in planning and zoning, and that's that cap. That's preventing them from maybe joining and in the process learning more about the city.
So you're not just learning about the city, you're actually voting and making decisions that impact people's lives. That's the part that I think we're understanding. Like when we talk about the impact of all the flooding. And so just like there's things that are going on now that I'm not happy with about where people don't want to put retention ponds, but neighborhoods are flooding. But you wouldn't know that Sunset Acres has been flooding for all these years if you haven't been here. But then all of a sudden you're sitting there in a chair and you're looking at it and it might seem like, oh, well, we need to do this because what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that all these people over there have lost their homes, been flooded out for years, and nothing's ever been done. But now that we finally have an opportunity to do something, you have people that are sitting there that have no idea what we're even talking about. But you're about to make a vote that's impacting people's lives and lives, you know, where they live and just different things. That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
I don't really care either way. It's just difficult.
if I can
Mr.
just,
Chair,
I know you gotta go.
And I'm just gonna go ahead and say 3 years from me, but down from 3.
Okay,
Okay,
so let's do this. It's 7:05. Let's take our short 5-minute break and then we'll come back to that one. And thank you for telling us that.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, Rob.
Sorry. Here we go. Okay, so thank you first off for that's a perspective that I think is important, and for me anyways, I get it. I understand more now. But I don't think there was enough for 2 years. But I do think I've heard 3 from, well, at least we heard it from Rob. So if it's all right, I'll go around and we'll just tell me 3-year or 5-year. And we'll go from there. So I have Rob at 3. Yancy? 3, okay. Jim, 5, okay.
Number 5.
Okay.
The 3, if that's what everybody says, but.
No, I understand, but if that's okay, do you,
I just think there's value being around, reading the paper, talking to people, being involved, seeing how the town does slow. I think there's real value in that, and I do think the 5 years, I think the longer you're here, the more you have the opportunity to learn. And, you know, like I was complimenting him saying, Daniel, that he's a unicorn because he has picked it up so quickly. He wanted to be, he jumped in. And I love that.
He's the exception.
He is the exception. That's why
He's
he's
the
a wonderful
exception.
unicorn that we have. But given really a blank slate, I really would stay with 5.
okay. Gotcha. I can see where this is going. Daniel,
I'll go with 3.
okay. Well, I just set myself
I
up
have
there.
to
didn't I?
say 5 because I think living it is different.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just a perspective I have. It's just me. It's no disregard to
It's
anyone else.
okay, I just feel like it's better to give people a choice, you know, because. Okay, if it's 3 and I've lived here for 3 years, well, I can choose to be on the board. And if I feel like maybe I need more time, then I can choose not to. I know, wait until 5 years.
Okay, so we have 3 at 5 and 3 at 3. Okay, just leave it at that. We could just leave it at that. No. Okay, so
Out of this. John wants no part of this.
so I did bring it up. Yeah, it was wise. When I first moved here, there, I was living on Hopkins Street. There was no Wonder World bypass. And all of the, my real estate lady was brilliant. She showed me the house on a Sunday morning and it was just so quiet, and nice. No traffic. And,
It's intentional.
I put in my office in one of the front bedrooms and quickly learned that the concrete trucks started delivering their loads from Hunter, the quarry, to Wimberley. And they had to drive past my house and then turn left, remember, on what was then Old Ranch Road 12, now Moore Street. And I was counting like 40 concrete trucks an hour starting at 6 a.m. And so it caught my attention pretty quick. Just bought the house, here's all this traffic. And then of course, the big crushed stone trucks, the open top, they would come after the concrete guys because Wimberley was really just kind of growing at that point. And I was able to get involved. Remember, forget his name, George. No, Vonderlippy. Remember George Vonderlippy? I loved him. He was such a nice guy. He lived down on Belvin Street across from the big white house, and his wife, Virginia. But George and Joe Cox is who I met, but I was only here 2 years at that point. And so we started talking and then realized that, a lot of other people felt the same way, and in the Heritage neighborhood and so on, about traffic and issues. And at the time, the trucks were coming back. I'm getting to my vote. The trucks were coming back from Wimberley and turning right on Craddock, which wasn't Craddock then. Well, it was Craddock, but it was before it was fixed. And then all the people on Craddock, Joe Bernard and his friends were very upset because these empty trucks were coming back. So the council voted to send all the trucks back down Moore Street and back past my house empty to go reload up. Now I'm pissed.
Yeah.
And we got involved and started writing, and they said, well, gee, we want you to be a neighborhood rep. And, you know, I started writing some letters to the editor and we want you to be on the P and Z. And so I was nominated on P and Z before I had lived here for 5 years. And I was motivated to get on P and Z.
Well, so did you win?
I did not. I was nominated by Joe Cox 3 times.
Well, then maybe there's an exception, so you could have legitimately gotten on if you had been.
I don't think this 5-year deal was here,
There.
but I felt like I was educated enough specifically on that issue and maybe on that part of town to have a good voice there. And I kept getting 3 votes at the city council 3 times. And it wasn't like they did it once a year back then. They did it when there was an opening. So like in the span of a year, I got rejected 3 times for city council to serve on the P and Z. I had lived here for less than 5 years. And my point of the story was, I thought, well, to hell with it. I'm just going to run for city council then. If you're not going to put me on P and Z, I'm for city council, which I did. But so I'm going to say, I do think that there can be, qualified folks, and so I'm going to vote for 3. But that's my reasoning. I don't know when the 5 was put in. It wasn't that way then. I don't even know if there was a requirement, but I get the 5. I really do. I get it. There's something to speak for institutional knowledge and, hey, we've been through this before, especially flooding and I get that. But I also think that,
People usually get involved.
You can
and
get-
upset about something.
yeah, I know. And
That's what you see people wanting to go get it.
Right.
They get upset about something.
Yeah, and it turned out that a lot of people were upset about it. I mean, because it was a kind of a newer issue. Obviously, Hopkins has always had traffic, but it was because of all the new growth. And it wasn't just Wimberley, it was up the university, all the apartment growth that was needing concrete was all going through that one, but it led to the Wonder World extension. I mean, it led to the effort by the city council to hire a lobbyist and to go to Washington DC and to lobby for that money. And then we ended up getting the money and then we ended.
Wonder World was a clear reflection of people dying in ambulances because they couldn't get to the hospital.
That was the bridge.
That was the bridge. That was the bridge.
This was the extension. And so, I don't know, I think maybe, and I played a little bit of a role in that extension. And I was there in the room when we were, Yep.
That was
took a while,
Well,
but it was the motivation. And I hate to stifle that if it's there. I didn't know a whole lot
the way
about
that
this.
I would calm myself down, I feel like unqualified people, the city council doesn't listen to us anyway.
It's being recorded.
Yeah, let's,
Yeah,
please
okay.
listen. We have 3 people.
Well, thanks for listening to my story, but that's kind of the reason. And I think all the viewpoints are really legitimate. And,
You feel bad about your vote, John?
sorry.
How about your vote for 3? Do you feel good about it?
Yeah, I do. I do. And, I mean, we'll have to revisit. My hope is that it gets us more, not bad people on the commission, but it broadens the pool of people who can serve because
I think the 5 years came in when we had people, this is what really happened to the 5 years. You had people that lived in San Marcos, they got on P and Z, but then they moved to New Braunfels and other places, and you couldn't quite prove their residency. Until then you had people that they were leasing houses from, or whatever they were doing, paying to the city and said they're out and out lying because I kicked them out of the house. And they don't live in San Marcos. And it was just causing all these problems because you get people that, we had an influx of people that were getting on, but they really weren't stable enough and they were moving and getting apartments here and there. And you, like you said, with city council, you can't prove residency. I think that was a part of the problem. 'Cause
I remember
know a
that.
couple of people that
Yeah.
lived in my neighborhood that didn't live in my neighborhood, but they were on P and Z, and it turned into this big old.
Well, then we had to remove a P and Z member because he just didn't live here anymore.
He did.
And,
Yeah, it's a big, and so that's when you get into real problems.
But I mean, there's an example of, because of there's so much growth coming to Central Texas and, I serve on the Austin San Antonio Corridor Council and, all of our projections that we review regularly is 4.9 million now, Austin and San Antonio to 9 million by 2045. So we're talking just like 20 years from now. 4.9 to 9 million people. And there's going to be a lot of influx, even just from the Austin Manor chip manufacturing plants there's 55,000 jobs there in those fab plants. And so we'll see a lot of that growth as well. So I don't want to limit their opportunity. And somebody gave me, a pretty well-respected council member at the time gave me an opportunity to serve on P and Z in less than 5 years, 3 times. So anyway, thanks for listening to that. So is there anything else in 701 that we need to discuss?
Last thing will be, the commission shall establish bylaws governing the rules of procedure in any election of officers. I wanted to know what bylaws were, so I found them on the city website and quoted them in one meeting, and I was told, well, those aren't the bylaws. I said, well, what are? The ones I was going by have been approved in 2014, signed by Chris. Chair. They said, no, those aren't the ones we use anymore. I said, well, what are the ones we use? Well, those were approved in 2018. I said, well, show me when they were approved. And it turns out 2018 version was never approved. And so they sort of went back and forth, and then the Finance and Audit Committee is the one who approves them and writes them, edited them, came up with a set, and then sent it to P and Z, and that's when Bill went, we revised quite a bit, a lot, or like 20 revisions, and then sent it back up the line, and then that got approved. That was only like 6 months ago.
This was just.
But the point is, we didn't establish the bylaws, someone else established them for us and then sent them back to us for review. And apparently we did not.
Most recently?
Yeah,
6 months ago.
yeah.
Who?
What?
I don't know, who did establish it?
The
The Finance and Audit.
Finance and Audit Committee.
And they sent it back.
That's
City
the
Council,
council.
City Council, Subcommittee of City Council. They sent them back to us, and there were a lot of things that just weren't applicable for us and didn't work for us. And so we changed it, but the point is, we did not establish our bylaws. They were established
Yes.
for
But
us.
didn't they say that this was just a blanket for like all, and we were,
Yes,
but it
yes,
should
and
be,
Sam, I think
but
you
it
got
should be
involved.
different. I think you got involved. Didn't you
We-
come to that
We
meeting?
had separate bylaws, and there was argument.
The 2014 bylaws, I know exactly the bylaws you're referring
Yeah.
to, yes, sir.
And that there was some saying all boards and commissions should have the same bylaws. Others were making the argument that no, P and Z is a different animal, they should have their own. But it turns out we all have the same.
So
But
let
we
me,
didn't do it, we didn't write it.
But we did, they were sent to us
They were
and then
sent to
we were
us.
asked to make revisions.
So are you-
Comments,
Comments, not revisions,
Revisions.
comments, I'm sorry.
So what's your suggested change? Because I understand exactly what you're going through.
Well, we don't want it to say that P and Z does
Right,
it
probably say the
because we don't.
parks.
We got the same.
Yeah.
at Parks,
Okay.
and we wouldn't sign them. The commission denied it twice.
Well, we.
6-1.
We sent recommendations for changes and I guess they were done.
Have we heard that?
Yeah, I think so. I
I
don't,
don't know if that's.
We sent recommendations of changes too, and nothing's come back.
You have a,
What do you want to do? Well, you already have it. It says the commission shall establish the bylaws.
yeah, but that's not happening.
well, what they did was they said, well, we're sending you the bylaws to review, but you're allowed to send it back to the audit and finance committee. Yeah, you know,
That's what we did. We sent suggested changes back. We struck a bunch of language.
You're back.
No, hell, no.
Was that about 6 months ago approximately?
Well, Sam was on video and I think I got on him, cause yeah, remember,
I can't remember.
Yeah, maybe,
I answered your question. That's all you needed, I think.
maybe.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was,
What-
which I was glad because I was hungry,
Well, what
actually.
did Parks decide?
we made revisions and sent it back to, and, well, I dug a little deeper and found out how it all went down and, you know,
Is it dead in the water? Or revisions from parks?
no, but the original changes were, there was a ton of back and forth and a lot of wordsmithing, let's put it that
Well, the
way.
2014 version is substantially different than what came out. I mean, night and day. It's like,
Well, this says to me that you guys shall establish, so why the hell don't you just put it on your agenda and write up the Bible?
that's not an option.
Well, I certainly don't want to change the language to what's happening. because
Yeah. I wouldn't change it. I would just put it on the agenda for creation of bylaw, set up a committee and do it.
Look at that.
Well, I mean, it says it in clear language, the commission shall.
You know, 2018, when council established that process, you know, I don't know what discussions were had, council, and city attorney at that time, you know, but I remember it was 2018 when they said all boards and commissions are gonna have these bylaws because there were issues, not with the plan and zoning commission, there were issues with other boards. And the council was trying to get some uniformity in how they conduct their business. So I kind of felt
But
like
this is a new revision.
wide net was cast that
The
included.
ones that they got 6 months ago was significantly different than the 2018 version. So I don't know if you want to change that.
No, I don't think, but maybe at the very end where it says we can make suggestions on procedure, what is it?
The commission.
I don't, no, way at the end of this, well, P, propose any recommendations, it may seem desirable to ensure compliance with the provisions of the charter. Blah, 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 so,
I mean, I would say be careful what you wish for here because it's already giving you the power to do
I
it.
wouldn't even change it.
yeah.
Because see, I think that where we made the mistake is no one looked at the charter to see what the charter said, but it's clearly defined in here what it should be.
So that would be a discussion I'll have to have with the council. If that's something I want to explore. I mean,
Well,
not.
not really.
But I mean, with the.
Yeah.
The charter already,
So
yeah, the P and Z.
that's an issue to discuss separately.
Okay.
Yeah, I would
We
change
need
it.
something. Guess it
Go for it.
We just put it on the agenda.
There you go.
All right, so let's leave it be.
Leave it be.
I think.
Let
we're
it
better off
be.
with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. let it- All right, 7:02, Sam.
All right, your powers and duties. Well, you're an advisory body, the Planning and Zoning Commission. Oh, this is an interesting thing here. I thought this was strange. It's under powers and duties of the commission, but the planning and zoning staff shall follow all city ordinances, rules and regulations and confer with the city attorney before making recommendations to the commission. I kind of feel like that's something that happened around 2011. I when that came in. I think that's,
Which section?
I'm sorry, 7021. I think there were some concerns at that time. I feel like that was a recent addition in the 2010s. But anyways, that's just saying, planning staff, don't just go rogue on us. Make sure you're following all city rules and ordinances before you bring stuff to the commission.
Oh,
I don't know.
There.
There must have been,
yeah,
I feel it's a reaction to something.
Yeah.
Those kinds of provisions are a reaction to a
I've got a
situation.
gigantic issue on this one. First sentence of number one, be responsible to and act as an advisory body to the council on all matters related to the physical growth and development of the city. Annexation, by definition, is physical growth. But we are never asked to weigh in on annexation.
So the problem there is it's state law. That's where the problem is the state law. And I think
What does state law say?
there's almost not a role for the planning and zoning commission. I could certainly drill down to it a little deeper, but now,
Please do, because we would only be advisory. So we would not be making decisions. We would only be an advisory body. So does the state law say we can't be indeed not an advisory body?
I can certainly look at that, but it doesn't contemplate a role for the planning and zoning commission, but does it prohibit you from having a role? I can certainly.
And also,
Don't know.
development, we don't get.
those are the committee.
So if you should look up development agreements and annexation.
So are you saying that the P and Z doesn't ever get to put a stamp on a development agreement, even after it's negotiated?
Correct.
And again, development agreements that are covered by state law, they lay out the process, they don't say anything. So really the question is, even though it doesn't define a role for the planning and zoning commission, does it prohibit?
Right.
So
I certainly would be happy to explore that for y'all.
wouldn't there be some provisions of a development agreement that are outside the purview of planning and zoning?
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, I can kind of see where, like, if there's an incentive or if there's a requirement for, something that the city council would be responsible for, putting in there, that's not really something that might be associated with a planning and zoning decision.
Oh, I agree, but I mean, what it says is growth and development of the city. So
You want to reword that? Because that really sounds like somebody I know wrote that.
yeah,
I mean, I'm fine with you guys wordsmithing it, think about it, and come back with some.
Says about state law.
And I guess I should make sure, if that's what.
Well,
Wants this whole, or is it?
Yeah, I'm
there
fine with
more
that.
of you That would like to explore that, I guess.
Yancy, do you want to say something? Yeah. No, okay.
I think we should explore it only because then either take it out, because I
Yeah.
remember in a meeting, either you or Bill brought it up. And it was said that planning staff was now planning staff was now taking care of this, and they give their recommendation to council and they do all of that. But it was like, Bill was asking very pointed, specific questions, and then staff had to step in and say, well, no, because y'all don't do that anymore. We now do that, so maybe it shouldn't be in the charter.
Maybe we should take back that authority. We're supposed to have that authority. I think that's what Jim is asking. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
What does this mean?
Yeah, I'm only asking for advisory,
Right.
Not saying that we make the decision, but
That would be inappropriate for us. to
But then we
do.
it's like a lot of things we do, it all still goes to council.
Right.
A lot of things
Charter
go
said we
to
should
council for
be
their approval.
Advisory,
Yeah, so what,
either take it out or.
how far does that go? How wide?
Well, come up with some language for us to
I'll
talk.
leave it, but
Oh, you do?
What does it mean?
But we need clarification. Can we really, does the state allow us?
If there's gonna be, the question is though, if you want to implicit authority. on development agreements and annexation, I guess is what you want to get into. I can tell you whether it prohibits or not. And then at that point, you can decide whether it's something that the council would be better off to address in an ordinance at their discretion versus the voters saying,
Yeah, I think
It's not
council is gonna
reasonable.
push back on the development agreement, because that's a negotiated.
I don't think you're saying that explicit authority. I just think that we used to know things, but then all of a sudden things would be happening and you'd hear about it and it's like, well, when did that happen? Because it says that we used to do that or P and Z used to do it, but now all of a sudden we don't hear. It's just something that's done over here. And I think that's what you're saying is like, we used to have knowledge of certain things, but then all of a sudden it's just gone. But this stayed the same. There's no real explanation. So what is it, right? Or am I missing something?
Well, I'm fine. I think I've heard everybody's pretty okay with you kind of getting a bit more research and explanation on those.
right, and
that
let's
section.
go to your point on all matters. If you take the literal meaning, well, then maybe you need to revise that according to, do you want to give council the ability to decide what matters? Weigh in, but he should or shouldn't weigh in
Well,
on.
actually, that's versus addressed in the land development code. There is something in there. But it does say something about, and the council shall tell or direct P and Z what they, on issues that they can and can't.
Right, but
There's something, but
that seems, to your point, then it's inaccurate to say all matters. In other words,
Correct,
council can decide,
right.
okay, let me
Yeah.
find out what's prohibited. and not
That's pretty
prohibited.
cut and dry, all matters.
Yeah, it just, that's what we say, clarify. It's-
Okay, anything else on
Yeah,
702?
It says we shall, P and Z shall review and be the final approval authority for the subdivision and planning.
And I think state law now, I think we're gonna have to revisit that because we're running into the time limits that are now available to have plats approved.
Right, right. And I
And
don't think we ever done any subdivision.
We never did it anyway.
well, it's a subdivision plat.
Okay.
So
Oh,
now what
Do we need to remove that then?
sounds like we do, because there is that time, we used to approve plats. But we realized, well, we don't have the expertise to say yay or no in the plat if it meets the state regulation. We don't have that knowledge or background. So, but for us to have to approve it, it interfered with some time.
right, and then we
Timeline,
get
so-
dinged.
So they still present plats to us, but
No.
we don't vote on.
And
If you,
Amanda
if
came
you,
out and gave the reason
Yeah.
that you're giving now and said that it was that the reason why is because there was a time limit. And they've always tried to come out and explain the things that they say we're supposed to be doing, but the reason why we're not.
Yeah.
you would not be prohibited from, the state law is constantly changing on this stuff. You wouldn't be prohibited from being the final approver if state law changes and we have a process, but it would come down to an ordinance that grants you that pursuant to state law, so it does seem to be kind of,
Well, my question is, should
Right now.
this, since state law has changed on this, and other charter review processes had removal of language that, or to align the language with the new state law from the attorney's office. So is this something that you'll probably be looking at for
yeah,
potential change?
yeah,
And
and
surely you're gonna have to make a list of, and bring
And-
that to us.
yes, and one of the things you could do is word it in a way where it's not prohibition or it's some, as to the extent allowed by state law or is allowed by state law. The city council may delegate the authority. So yes,
Okay,
we'll put that kind of list.
okay. So we'll be getting a list on some of these And this is pretty obvious. It says will be final and may not be appealed. That's gotta go because that's not the
Because
law,
that's not true.
right?
But also, the power to revoke or suspend. I think I was told that we can't even do that, not the appealable part, but that we can't do that, that there's some process in the LDC that says something about somebody has to determine, code enforcement has to determine that it should be revoked, and then we formally do something like that. In other words, we don't have that authority to revoke or suspend. So there's the revoke and suspend, and then also not appealable. The not appealable, that's a state law thing, but the revoke and suspend needs to be addressed. Because that conflicts with an interpretation. I don't care.
Okay.
Anything else, Jim? Okay. That was a involved section. 701 and 702. Yeah, I know, right? They had to know that was coming when they appointed you. They can't
We
say.
needed
All
clarification.
right, I'm gonna try and wrap us up around 10 of them, if that's all right. So I think we may have time for 703.
All right, comp plan. First of all, this requires that the city adopt a comp plan, right? Comprehensive plan for the city shall be used to guide the growth and development of the city. So we go through that exercise, and that's actually also something that's addressed in state law. We adopt it by ordinance. And it's supposed to, here's the two-step process. We adopt the comp plan, and then what is supposed to happen after that? That's when the planning and zoning, or the planning staff starts to rework the regulations to be consistent with the comp plan. And that's sometimes a very difficult task. You know, the thing that comes to mind is always the neighborhood character study, remember the 2013. But again, that's, we've got the LDC is supposed to track the comp plan, the goals of the comp plan.
My
Let's see
favorite,
if there's anything out of the ordinary here, there in A.
section B.
Yeah, that's the commission shall conduct an ongoing review of the plan in accordance with 702.
Council
Yeah, that's just-
council can amend the comp plan, having a public hearing, sending it back to P and Z after it was already at P and Z.
So,
Yeah, I always thought that was a little circuitous. But what do you guys think about that? Because you would have already looked at the comp plan, gone through it and voted on it, right?
we redlined it. You do all those good things.
I mean, I do remember comp plan amendments. You know, and it wasn't so much that you had to go back, it was just the time that it took to get it on our agenda, then get it on your agenda, then get it back on our
It took
agenda.
2 years, yeah.
It was just, and I could never quite, I mean, I get it, but I don't know.
Right, in 702, the reference in 702 is that the commission will have an ongoing review of the comp plan to include an annual public hearing on the plan. And I don't know.
Oh,
if
I'm
that's
missing that
something you
page.
all are actually doing. This is under 702.
Yeah.
7,
I'm missing that page.
A, page 2443 on my.
Page 20.
702.
I got that one. I don't have page
So it's
20.
Section 7.0.
I got 21.
Section what?
7.02,
7.02.
subparagraph 7.
Yeah, I don't
A.
know. Let me make sure.
You know, I don't know if we've been doing that annually, but no, we're doing a public hearing on the plan. No,
Oh, I do have
We
it.
don't have a
I do
public
have it.
hearing.
in fact, I don't think that's ever happened.
Well, I know that we did when we were trying to
Give one.
Give one pass.
Yes, it has, but in terms of annual review,
102, paragraph 7A.
But didn't they
There
bring
you-
one on, because they were still trying to get one passed, but I just remember them bringing things and saying that this would be a change.
What are you saying?
This would be.
So just that's the cross-reference in 703. It says,
Oh,
commission shall hold an ongoing review of the plan in accordance with 702.
gotcha.
What 702 is requiring an annual hearing. So that might be just something we'll have to give a planning staff, say, well, we need to do, unless
that had been happening in
unless the
15
commission
years.
recommends
Yeah.
a change to that.
A says annual public hearing, B says every 3 years, make recommendations. So if you're under 7, A or
So
C.
section 702.
A says hold an annual public hearing. B is talking about making recommendations at least once every 3 years. And C talks about,
Well, B is about the land use and transportation elements, at least once every 3 years.
Well,
I don't know how that came about. I don't know.
I have one question for the P and Z members here. And I've noticed this, and it's to go through this massive exercise for the comp plan, and I mean massive,
Yeah. And expensive.
inexpensive, and there's, I mean, it's more than $1 million to do a comp plan rewrite, review. There's probably a steering committee of 40 people in the beginning or 20 people, and it goes to the, multiple public hearings and
gathering.
information gathering and all that stuff. And then we get through that. That takes years. And then gets to P and Z. It's the first body it goes to, and they take a bunch of time to review it. And it's because the book's that thick. And then it's got to go to council, and they got to take a bunch of time because the book's that thick. And, there's back and forth community input back to the council. So the process takes a long time, costs a lot of money. And then what do? We pass the comp plan, right? That's not that hard because it's just this broad, beautiful book with a lot of pictures in it. And this is our goals and our future. Well, then we start, like he said, you got to write the regulations to accomplish the comp plan goals. So they all have to be changed. That's another consultant, more citizen input, a lot of staff time. Then it goes to you guys. Then it comes to us, another book, not quite as thick, but important. And that takes years. Sometimes the last one that I was involved in from 2012 to 2018. So 6 years to get it done. And then what do? 3 years later, we start changing the damn thing. The problem with it, in my opinion, is the groups that have to use that code and use that comp plan to decide, you guys said you took 6 years to tell us what you want. Now we're changing it again.
It was already a problem with this one in the very beginning.
But
because
doesn't
the
this say 3 years?
didn't match the downtown area plan. That was a mess for us in a meeting because the comp plan didn't match the downtown plan and it was confusion.
But this says you have to,
Am I wrong?
at least once every 5 years. I mean, can't we pass something and live with it for a while and see?
No, because things are ever changing and I don't think it's gonna ever be possible because once you have all of these plans. And that's what I was saying, because you have all these things going on, so you have this downtown plan over here that they were working on. But you've been working on the comp plan for so long, finally the comp plan's done, but then they're over here finishing up this downtown plan, we get in a meeting and it's conflict after conflict between the two plans. So then they said, well, this was brought to us before this was adopted, so use these rules, and it's like. That's how that
And
works.
says, can't we follow it? No. I mean, should we? Yes, but in the case of the comp plan, it got a significant change as the ink wasn't even dry.
So, yeah,
Right. And that was in 20, we passed the LDC and
no, this is just now,
No, this is.
this is
recently.
just this
This
one,
is this last.
this last one.
well, I mean, the charter says, what are the words every 5 years? holding public, making recommendation to council regarding the update. I guess updates, I understand. Update entire comprehensive plan document at least once every 5 years. I think that's too much. All we ever do is plan and write documents. As soon as we pass them, we do it again. We never give the private sector who has to live with the comp plan rules. So that's what it's for. It's guiding growth and development, and it's laying out the type of growth you want and the rules to accomplish it. But then we change it. And I think it's
We get that, how do we stop that from?
well, this said that the charter requires it every 5 years.
So maybe we need to look at changing something in
I
the
think-
chart because it's expensive. And but then how are you gonna guide the growth and
And I was just looking at the,
develop? How
I
would you do
apologize,
that?
I was looking at the local government code, just seeing what it says about that, and it just talks about, where was it? I just. Oh, yes, a municipality may establish in its charter or by ordinance procedures for adopting, amending comprehensive plan. So, yeah, it's a
So
thing that says it can be addressed in a charter or in ordinances, both.
the first comp plan that I worked on that was approved was like 2006 or something like that. And it was one from 20 years prior. So it was old and it was crusty and it just never made sense with what we were dealing with at that time. So I get that, but this seems to me such an overreaction. I don't know how you guys feel. I mean, I'm giving you my perspective of I don't care about the council members having to deal with it. I care about the public that has to live with it, you know? And it seems to me like we're just constantly changing the rules when we all agreed what the rules should be and for a reason. Even if you had to go back and do de minimis changes or changes to reflect the new state law, that's fine. But to restart every 5 years, it's so disheartening to me.
Starting, I just think.
Well,
It says you have to do it.
If you compare the river runs through us plan, what year was that, 2013?
Yeah.
You compare that comp plan to the one we have now, it's a gigantic difference. The 2013 was a high bird's eye view, whereas the one we have now is in the weeds. So it would have been nice to just take the 2003 and revise it and not pay a consultant $1 million. It's like it started from zero, but that isn't what happened. I mean.
I know it's not what happened.
That's
And,
not what happened.
and think of, so I was on the steering committee of the 2013. Sat on the steering committee as a council representative. You know, had some experience with it. We passed it. And then this couple months after it was a few years after the LDC was passed, we passed the LDC finally in 2018 to implement the comp plan. There's no comp plan with it. There's no real comp plan without the rules to follow it. That took a while, which I get. And we lost a city manager, if you'll remember, in 2017. Like, that took a while to get, we had to get through that first before we got to the LDC. But the point is, this says you have to do it every 5 years. If I'm reading this right, make recommendations to the council regarding the update of the entire comprehensive plan every 5 years, at least every 5 years.
Update is different than what's been, that's been interpreted as a rewrite.
Yeah,
And, but I mean, an update, you change the
yeah.
population figure.
Right.
You change this. you change
Update for state law.
You don't create a whole new beast, but that's the problem. Every time, every however many years, someone feels that we need to redo the whole damn thing.
Yeah, in their
That's
image.
the problem.
Yeah, because they're there now, they're making the rules and they want it done in their view, their point of view. Well, my suggestion would be for the P and Z experts to think about it. I mean, I don't know what the number should be, but I think it should be a heck of a lot more than 5 years.
8 or 10.
I think 10.
10, and I thought that there was somewhere that they said it's updated every 10 years. Was it that
Isn't
hard?
there state law, Sam, on how often you have to do this?
Well, that's just what I was looking at real quick, and
I thought it was every 10 years.
yeah, 10 years seems to be the number, but
I-
It does talk about how the cities may in their charter establish.
I bet
Why
you,
don't you just send a definition or update? Maybe they're interpreting it differently.
Yeah, that's the problem is, an update is very doable.
Change the year according to the law.
Yeah,
Update would be very simple to do. Rewrites are. Because River Runs Through Us was a rewrite. The one we have now was a rewrite. They just.
well, this already says hold regarding update.
Right, right.
But
Updates are fine. It's
Yeah.
Rewrites that are.
But maybe
Because you're
it's
gonna
like-
update.
I think we need a bullet point that says rewrites of the comp plan shall occur no sooner than every whatever number,
Say
plug it.
not to know sooner, because you don't have to. do
Yeah,
it every
yeah.
year.
And
I like that.
all right, well, let's leave it on that and soak on that one. We'll start with that at our next meeting but
It takes the amount of money and time and citizen is just.
it rips all the people that participated in it are disenfranchised, really, because they spent all that time on a subcommittee or a steering committee and had these massive multiple meetings. It gets approved and all of a sudden it's being changed, in just a few years.
Came to us, it was changed.
They didn't even vote. The steering committee did not vote.
So it was a big.
That was the problem.
Yeah.
All right,
They were shocked.
Because I said this, and they were there complaining to us about, this is not what we did, this is not what we talked about. And that was a problem, because we're sitting here not knowing, what did you talk about?
didn't they do the most recent one during COVID?
Yes,
I can't remember.
or at least part of it.
Just start.
Started.
Because I remember calling like, are you serious? You're gonna write a comp plan? No one can even come to the meeting? I mean, can you wait a little? But I remember having that conversation with somebody in 2021.
Hey, John.
Okay,
I know you're in the meeting.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I sent an edit to Nan,
okay,
that I think would be helpful for everyone here on the period. I guess, and that we can vote on.
Okay.
Regarding 3 and 5,
okay.
which I think addresses a lot of our concerns, and I think it can be a template that we can give for future. Discussions on matters of how much time so much is needed. And I really think it fixes a lot of the concerns that both of you have. Right, so if you guys can just look at it.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing that.
I'll share that with the commissioner, or you just send it to me?
Yeah, I said,
We're now wrap up the second, but that's an office of established rules procedure. Which we don't do.
But
But you could.
the standard for comp plan is every 10 years typically, and that's, but what you're trying to say is we don't need to be doing it sooner than every 10 years. We would go, the 10 years is the kind of the standard.
Oh, no,
That'd be
okay.
great.
I think as long as it's the updates like they're having to do the downtown plan to make them coincide, like I get that, I don't have a problem with that, and I think that's what we updated. We're updating this to match this, but you're not starting all over, right? Yeah.
Well, that was a good discussion. I hadn't thought about it before we got to it. But we'll pick up there, and then we'll finish section 7 quickly at our next meeting, and then we should,
Next meeting is next week.
next
Next
Thursday.
Thursday.
at 5:30.
And they'll send out reminders, right?
Yancy?
And just to clarify that we're gonna be meeting every Thursday until that next Wednesday.
that I'd like to see.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, because that 1 week that you're busy enough.
Yours is.
Yeah, I think everybody, if we can just, before we,
Transparency and safety.
everybody, if you just hold on for a second, I'm gonna go to question and answer session with press and public. By seeing no press and no public, I will declare us adjourned at 8 PM.